The distress signal was never meant to reach anyone. It was not a cry for rescue filled with hope. It was a final reflex. A weak echo sent into the dark after all other choices were gone. The beings who launched it already believed they were finished. Their world, once calm and bright, had become quiet in the wrong way. Cities that had once glowed softly at night were now broken shadows. Communication towers stood silent. The skies were filled with smoke and drifting ash instead of stars. They were not a warlike people. For generations, they had believed in rules, councils, and agreements. Their history was shaped by discussion, not battle. Even their ships were built more for trade and exploration than defense. When danger appeared in their system, they assumed it could be talked away, delayed, or reasoned with. That belief cost them everything. The enemy did not announce itself. One day, unknown ships appeared at the edge of the system, dark and sharp, moving with purpose. No warnings were sent. No demands were made. The first strike came without words, destroying orbital stations and cutting communication between planets. Panic spread faster than any fleet could move. Their leaders tried to respond using old protocols, sending messages that asked for talks, for understanding, for time. None of those messages were answered. Within days, it became clear that this was not a conflict they could survive. Their defenses were outdated. Their pilots had little real combat experience. Every attempt to resist ended the same way, with more destruction and fewer lives saved. Entire population centers were erased in minutes. Refugees flooded into underground shelters, clinging to the hope that someone, somewhere, would notice what was happening. They sent requests for aid to nearby systems. Some messages were never delivered. Others received polite but distant replies. The galaxy was large, and help was slow. Some species feared drawing attention to themselves. Others calculated that arriving too late would only add their own losses to the count. As hours turned into days, those replies stopped coming altogether. Eventually, the truth became impossible to ignore. No fleet was coming. No alliance would arrive in time. Their world was marked for extinction, and everyone involved seemed to know it. That was when the final decision was made, deep beneath the surface of the planet. In a facility designed for disasters that were never expected to happen, an automated system was activated. It was old technology, rarely discussed, almost forgotten. The system's purpose was simple. If a civilization faced total collapse, it would release a general distress signal in every direction, without targeting any known recipient. It was not strategic. It was not smart. It was emotional, built on the idea that somewhere, somehow, someone might still listen. The signal carried no threat data, no political explanation. It only contained the essentials, coordinates, proof of sentient life, and a clear message that civilians were under attack. It did not accuse, it did not beg. It simply stated a fact and let the universe decide whether that fact mattered. When the system launched the signal, many of the scientists present did not even watch. They knew the odds. The region of space it would pass through was considered unstable, dangerous, and mostly ignored. Some star charts marked it as empty, others labeled it a dead zone. Ships avoided it. Civilizations pretended it did not exist. That region included Earth. To most of the galaxy, humanity was a rumor wrapped in warnings. Humans came from a planet with crushing gravity, violent weather, and a long history of internal conflict. Their species had evolved by surviving constant danger, predators, disease, natural disasters, and each other. Reports described them as physically dense, emotionally intense, and difficult to predict. First contact attempts had been minimal and cautious. Many species preferred to keep their distance. No one expected humans to be the ones who listen. The distress signal drifted silently for weeks, moving at the speed of light, crossing empty systems and dead stars. It weakened over time, breaking into fragments as cosmic interference damaged its structure. By the time it reached the outer edge of human-controlled space, it was barely detectable. Many monitoring systems would have ignored it as background noise, but human sensors were designed differently. On Earth, deep space arrays constantly scanned for anomalies. Humans had learned, through painful experience, that ignoring small warnings often led to massive disasters. When the signal appeared, it triggered alerts not because it was powerful, but because it was strange. It did not match known patterns. It did not belong. Analysts studied it carefully. They rebuilt broken sections, filtered out interference, and slowly uncovered the message hidden inside. As the meaning became clear, the room grew silent. This was not a probe, not a weapon, not a trick. It was a dying civilization's last message to the universe. There was no cheering, no dramatic speeches, just a heavy understanding that settled over everyone present. Humans knew what extinction looked like. They had come close more than once in their own history. They understood panic, loss, and the feeling of being alone while the world burned. That understanding mattered more than politics or fear. The data was forwarded up the chain of command. Within minutes, it reached people who had the authority to decide humanity's response. They did not ask whether the alien species was valuable, advanced, or useful. They asked one question only: was the signal real? When the answer came back yes, the next steps followed quickly. No announcement was made to the public at first. There was no vote across the planet. Humanity had learned that some decisions could not wait for perfect agreement. Time mattered. Lives were being lost every moment the discussion continued. Military and rescue divisions were quietly alerted. Fleets that had been on standby were reassigned. Medical ships began loading supplies. Engineers prepared for environments they had never seen before. Every action was done with speed, but not chaos. This was not humanity's first emergency. They moved with the calm of a species used to disaster. Some advisors warned against responding. They pointed out the risks. Unknown enemy forces, unknown technology, possible traps. They reminded leaders of humanity's reputation, and how entering galactic space with warships might provoke fear or retaliation. Those concerns were noted, and then set aside, because the signal had changed. It was not just a request for help. It was proof that the galaxy was not as distant as humans had once believed. Somewhere out there, people were dying, and humanity had heard them. To ignore that call would mean choosing safety over responsibility. For a species forged by survival, that choice felt wrong. As preparations continued, a realization spread quietly through command centers and shipyards alike. Humanity was about to step fully onto the galactic stage, not as explorers or traders, but as responders to a crisis no one else had stopped. The distress signal had awakened something deep and familiar in the Deathworlders. Not anger, not hunger for war, but the instinct to stand between danger and those who could not protect themselves. And as human ships powered up and began plotting a course toward an unknown war, one truth became clear, even if no one said it out loud: that broken, fading signal had not just reached Earth, it had found the worst possible species to ignore it, and the best possible one to answer. When the meaning of the distress signal was fully understood, there was no moment of celebration, no loud reaction. The room where it was decoded stayed quiet, filled only with the low hum of machines and slow breathing. The people there were trained professionals, used to handling dangerous information, but this was different. This was not a warning about an approaching threat. It was proof that somewhere far beyond Earth, an entire civilization was being erased. Human analysts replayed the signal again and again. They examined every fragment, every broken pattern, searching for deception or error. They found none. The message was raw and simple. It spoke of civilians under attack, of infrastructure collapsing, of time running out. It did not exaggerate. It did not ask for revenge. It only stated that help was needed and that no one had answered yet. That detail mattered. Humans had a long memory. Their own history was full of moments when help came too late or never came at all. Plagues, wars, natural disasters, again and again. Survival had depended on who responded and who turned away. As that understanding spread through the chain of command, the discussion shifted. This was no longer about whether humanity should respond. It became about how quickly they could. Orders began moving through secure channels. Deep space fleets that had been on routine patrol were recalled and reassigned. Ships designed for combat were paired with ships built for rescue and medical support. Humanity did not assume this would be a simple fight. They prepared for evacuation, defense, and long-term aid all at once. That balance said a lot about who they were. In shipyards across Earth and its orbital stations, crews were pulled from rest and training. Engineers checked systems that had never been tested together before. Medics stocked supplies without knowing what alien biology they would face. Pilots studied star charts marked with warnings and unknown zones. No one complained. Everyone understood the stakes. There was no public announcement yet. Humanity had learned that panic could slow response time, but rumors still spread. People noticed ships leaving orbit in unusual numbers. They noticed military traffic moving with purpose instead of routine. Whispers began circulating through civilian networks. Something serious was happening. At the highest level of leadership, the final authorization was given. The decision was recorded simply, without dramatic language. Humanity would respond to the distress signal, not as observers, not as negotiators. They would enter the conflict zone directly. Some advisors argued that this action would expose humanity to the galaxy too early. They warned that other species already feared humans. Sending fleets into unknown territory could confirm every bad rumor. Others pointed out that humanity did not even know who the enemy was. They could be far stronger than expected. They could retaliate. Those arguments were not ignored. They were measured against the alternative: doing nothing. In the end, the choice was clear. Humanity had not survived its own brutal history by waiting for perfect safety. Survival, for humans, had always meant acting before fear could take control. As the fleets prepared to depart, commanders gathered their crews. They did not speak about glory or conquest. They spoke about responsibility, about standing between civilians and extinction, about doing the job and coming home alive if possible. The message was simple and honest. This was not a war of choice. It was an answer. When the first ships powered their drives and broke free from Earth's gravity, something shifted. Humanity was leaving behind the comfort of known space and stepping into a role no one had assigned them. They were not part of any galactic alliance. No treaty protected them. No one had asked them to come. They were coming anyway. As the fleet moved faster than light, data from the distress signal continued to be analyzed. Every new detail painted a clearer picture of the situation. The enemy force was aggressive, organized, and efficient. They targeted infrastructure first, cutting power, communication, and transportation. They avoided prolonged battles, preferring overwhelming strikes that left no chance for recovery. This was not chaos. It was systematic destruction. Human tacticians recognized the pattern immediately. They had seen it before on their own planet, in their own wars. That recognition did not bring fear. It brought focus. Plans were adjusted, strategies refined. Humanity did not underestimate enemies who fought this way. At the same time, rescue planners worked nonstop. They calculated evacuation windows, shelter locations, and medical needs. They prepared for the worst-case scenario, arriving too late to save the planet, but not too late to save its people. That possibility weighed heavily on everyone involved. As the fleet crossed into regions of space rarely traveled, sensors picked up signs that confirmed the galaxy's silence. Nearby systems showed signs of avoidance. Trade routes had been rerouted, observational stations were powered down. Other species had seen what was happening and chosen to look away, not out of cruelty, but fear. Humans noticed, they did not judge. They understood fear very well. What they did not accept was letting fear decide who lived and who died. Within the fleet, morale remained steady. Soldiers trained, medics rehearsed emergency procedures, engineers monitored systems constantly. There was tension, but not doubt. Each person knew their role. Each trusted the others to do theirs. For many, this mission felt familiar in a way they could not fully explain. It echoed disaster responses back on Earth's cities flooded, earthquakes leveling homes, wildfires racing faster than evacuation orders. Humans had always run toward those disasters, not away from them. Space did not change that instinct. As the fleet drew closer to the signal's origin, faint sensor readings confirmed active combat, energy signatures, debris fields, broken satellites. The situation was ongoing. Lives were still being lost. That knowledge sharpened every decision. Commanders gave final instructions. Engagement rules were clear. Protect civilians first. Neutralize hostile forces only as needed. Avoid unnecessary destruction. Humanity was not there to make a statement. They were there to stop the bleeding. Just before the fleet exited faster than light travel, a final check was made. Systems ready. Crews in position. No further data expected before arrival. In those last quiet moments, some crew members thought about Earth. About blue skies, heavy rain, crowded cities, and loud arguments. About a planet that had taught them how hard survival could be. They carried that lesson with them now. The signal that had reached Earth had done more than ask for help. It had tested whether humanity truly believed its own values beyond its home world. The answer was already in motion, traveling through the dark at impossible speed. When the fleet finally emerged near the endangered system, humanity did not arrive as conquerors or saviors. They arrived as a species that had heard suffering and refused to pretend it was none of their concern. And in that moment, without speeches or declarations, humanity answered the distress call not with words, but with action. As the human fleet moved closer to the troubled system, every crew member felt a mix of tension and focus. Unlike previous experiences in their own solar system, this was not a training exercise or a border patrol. This was real. Lives depended on them. And unlike Earth, there were no familiar rules. The galaxy beyond had its own harsh realities. Some civilizations cared, some ignored, and some were outright dangerous. Humans had prepared for this, but nothing could replace the feeling of stepping into the unknown. Directly into the midst of a disaster, sensors aboard the ships picked up energy signatures, debris, and damaged satellites. Small bursts of light appeared from the planet's surface, evidence of ongoing attacks. The enemy had not slowed down. They had not paused for negotiations. Their precision was frightening. Each strike designed to cripple, to create panic, and to eliminate any hope of organized resistance. For humans, though the pattern was clear, they had seen similar strategies on their own world, from the way enemies had moved during wars and raids. That familiarity allowed them to prepare a response, almost instinctively. The galaxy was watching, even if it did not openly intervene. Alien species, through distant sensors and intercepted communications, detected the sudden movement of humans into the system. Some were terrified. Stories about humans had always included warnings about their resilience, their ability to endure extreme conditions, and their unrelenting focus in crime. To see them actively approaching a dangerous system sent shockwaves. Rumors spread. What exactly were humans going to do, and how far would they go? Many observers expected devastation, believing that humans were brutal and unpredictable. They had no idea what humanity intended. For the humans themselves, there was no intention of unnecessary destruction. Every ship in the fleet had been meticulously prepared for efficiency. Their warships were heavily armored, designed to withstand direct hits, yet agile enough to maneuver around civilians and fragile structures. The crew had been trained for this scenario combat, paired with rescue. Soldiers, pilots, and medics worked together seamlessly. A coordinated force built from centuries of surviving against extreme odds. They were not seeking glory, they were seeking to save lives. But at the same time, Their presence alone was intimidating. To an outside observer, the fleet looked like a wall of steel moving silently toward its target, carrying both the promise of aid and the threat of unstoppable force. As they approached the alien planet, initial contact began with long-range scans. Humans avoided unnecessary engagement at first. They did not want to provoke the enemy unnecessarily, nor did they want to reveal their full capabilities too early. But the enemy was relentless. Automated defenses and attack drones fired intermittently, forcing human ships to respond. The response was swift, precise, and terrifying in its efficiency. Humans disabled the enemy systems with minimal risk to civilians, neutralizing threats without destroying the structures the aliens still relied on. Every strike was calculated to preserve life and limit collateral damage. For the aliens watching from hiding places on the planet below, it was unlike anything they had ever seen. Instead of a rampage, they saw discipline and focus. Every human ship operated as part of a larger plan, each action carefully measured against the outcome they wanted, the protection of the innocent. Meanwhile, communication channels remained open. Humans attempted to establish contact with the remaining alien populations where possible. Simple messages were sent, offering instructions and reassurance. They guided survivors to safer zones, coordinated with escape routes, and provided real-time information about enemy movements. Many aliens could hardly believe the clarity and efficiency of these operations. They had expected fear, chaos, or indifference. Instead, they found a species that seemed to operate on instinctive empathy while simultaneously applying a mastery of strategy. The battle itself was short but intense. The human fleet moved like a tide of controlled force. Enemy ships and automated weapons systems that had terrorized the planet were neutralized with surgical precision. Explosions happened, yes, but in controlled areas that minimized civilian casualties. From orbit, the planet was scarred, but not obliterated. Broken satellites fell harmlessly into the ocean. Automated defenses were hacked or destroyed, and critical areas for civilian survival were preserved. The enemy forces, though aggressive and technologically advanced, had underestimated the human approach. They had expected brute force, but what they faced was coordinated intelligence, adaptability, and relentless determination. Inside the human command centers, officers coordinated every detail. Every new piece of sensor data was used immediately to adjust tactics. Pilots received updates mid-flight. Soldiers were redirected on the spot, and medics prepared for casualties before they arrived. The synergy between units was remarkable. Humans had mastered the art of working together in extreme conditions. Individual courage mattered, but collective coordination was what made them formidable. The aliens observing from below could see ships working in patterns that resembled a living organism, each movement intentional, each decision reactive yet part of a greater plan. Amid the fighting, some human crews risked everything to protect alien civilians. Rescue pods were deployed into areas that were still under threat, evacuating families, transporting the injured, and providing critical supplies. Soldiers on boarding teams secured zones for safe landing and coordinated with medical units to treat those who were wounded. Even in the chaos of combat, no one was ignored. Humans understood survival on a personal level, and that understanding extended to every life they could reach. Their philosophy was clear: no one left behind, no matter the danger. The efficiency of human tactics was not just about military skill, it reflected their adaptability. They adjusted constantly, responding to enemy behavior in real time. When one attack failed to neutralize a threat, they shifted strategies immediately, using unexpected angles and new techniques. Enemy forces, trained for routine dominance, were thrown into confusion. They had never encountered an opponent that learned so quickly, acted so decisively, and maintained control over every operation simultaneously. It was terrifying and awe-inspiring in equal measure. During this operation, humans also demonstrated something no other species had shown in this situation: restraint. They were capable of overwhelming force, but they chose to apply it only where necessary. Every decision balanced immediate threat with the preservation of life. The aliens witnessing this began to question their assumptions. Humans were not mindless predators. They were not here for conquest. They were here to save, protect, and restore order amidst chaos. That understanding would later reshape how other species viewed humanity in the galaxy. As the battle drew to a close, the enemy was effectively neutralized. Automated systems were disabled, hostile ships were removed from orbit, and the planet's surface was largely stabilized. The humans had achieved the impossible. They had entered an active war zone, faced superior enemy forces, and emerged in control, all while prioritizing the survival of civilians. The aliens on the ground, hiding in tunnels or behind wreckage, could now see the full scale of what had happened. Their world was damaged, yes, but it still existed. They were still alive. This moment left an impression on everyone involved. For humans, it was confirmation of what they already knew about themselves. They survived, they adapted, and they acted when it mattered most. For the aliens, it was a revelation. The species that many had feared, whispered about, or ignored for safety reasons, had arrived not to destroy, but to protect. They had entered chaos and imposed order without turning it into terror. Their actions were efficient, decisive, and deeply humane. España began coordinating the next stage of their mission, the evacuation and stabilization of the population. They had already set a precedent. Other species observing from afar realized that humans operated according to rules different from their own. Instinctive protection combined with relentless efficiency. This combination was unpredictable, and therefore incredibly powerful. The galaxy's perception of humanity would never be the same again. In the end, the battle was remembered not as a fight, but as a display of what the species was capable of when confronted with disaster. Humans had crossed boundaries, faced unknown enemies, and demonstrated both fearlessness and discipline. They had not sought glory, territory, or recognition. They had simply acted. And in doing so, they proved that the Deathworlders were not just survivors, they were a force unlike any other in the galaxy, even as they prepared to move on to the next phase, rescuing and protecting the alien population. The impact of their arrival lingered. Observers noted the precision, the restraint, and the courage. Reports circulated quickly, and whispers spread through the galactic networks. Some species felt relief, others fear, and still others admiration. The simple truth was undeniable. When humans acted, the outcome was not random. It was controlled, effective, and life-altering. And so, as the fleet stabilized the situation and prepared to assist the survivors, one fact became clear. Humanity had not just arrived in a war zone, they had reshaped it. And in doing so, they had reminded the galaxy that when Deathworlders chose to intervene, they did so with skill, discipline, and a singular focus on saving life. As the dust settled over the battered planet, humans began the next phase of their mission, the rescue of the alien population. What they faced on the surface was far worse than they had imagined. Cities that had once gleamed under the light of twin suns were now reduced to skeletal frames of buildings, smoke rising from collapsed towers, streets littered with debris, and the occasional flicker of remaining power grids that still struggled to function. For the alien survivors, the devastation was almost unimaginable, and yet humans approached it with calm efficiency, as though disaster was something they had lived through before. And, in many ways, they had. Medical teams were the first to deploy, landing in zones identified by orbital scans as having the most survivors. These crews were ready for any scenario, equipped with advanced triage equipment, mobile surgical units, and supplies that could sustain life in extreme conditions. They moved with speed but also care, understanding that each injured alien was not just a patient but a being with a story, a family, a place in the world that the humans had come to protect. In corridors of broken buildings and tunnels filled with smoke, humans worked tirelessly to extract civilians, carry the wounded to safer areas, and stabilize those whose injuries could have been fatal. Simultaneously, engineers and technicians began the delicate task of restoring critical infrastructure. Power stations, communication relays, and water purification systems had been sabotaged by the enemy or destroyed during bombardment. Humans assessed each structure carefully, repairing what could be salvaged and replacing what could not. Their work was systematic, their efficiency remarkable. To them, this was as much a battlefield as any spacefight. They were not just rescuing people. They were preserving the possibility of a functioning world. Each repaired system allowed more survivors to be reached, more medical care to be administered, and more hope to be restored. On the front lines of safety, soldiers and defense teams stood as shields. They patrolled the streets, guarded critical installations, and set up secure zones for civilians to gather. Unlike traditional warfare, this was not about conquest or punishment. It was about control, protection, and ensuring that no one would be harmed while help was arriving. Their presence was both comforting and intimidating to the survivors. Many aliens had never seen a species operate with such combination of calm, authority, and readiness to act. They were not there to dominate. They were there to ensure survival. Rescue operations often required humans to take significant personal risks. In one instance, a collapsed building housed dozens of survivors trapped under rubble, with enemy drones still scanning the area. Human engineers rigged stabilizing beams, while soldiers provided cover fire, and medics prepared to treat the injured once extracted. Each movement was precise, calculated, and coordinated. The aliens watching this process could only stare in awe. Unlike any help they had hoped for, these humans were willing to face danger themselves in order to save lives. As the evacuation proceeded, humans began transporting survivors to ships and temporary shelters outside the planet's most dangerous zones. Each group moved under strict supervision, ensuring that medical care, nutrition, and protection were immediately available. Children and the elderly, often the most vulnerable, received particular attention. The alien population had known fear, hunger, and helplessness for weeks, and now they encountered humans who acted with unwavering focus, doing everything possible to reverse the suffering. Communication played a key role in the rescue. Humans set up temporary channels to coordinate among rescue teams and relay real-time updates to the orbital command centers. They also attempted to communicate with alien survivors, learning basic patterns of language and signaling, using gestures, symbols, and simplified sounds to guide them to safety. Many survivors could not believe that someone they had never seen before would care so much to learn how to communicate under extreme stress. This effort alone saved countless lives, allowing survivors to follow instructions quickly without confusion or panic. The aliens began to understand that the humans were not bound by the same limitations their own species had accepted. While the humans had advanced technology, they were not simply deploying machines to solve problems. Every human action reflected understanding, empathy, and judgment. They made choices not based on efficiency alone, but on the value of life. Even in situations where speed and results could have dictated otherwise, this combination of technical skill and moral instinct left a deep impression on the alien population. Over the course of days, human teams methodically worked through the most damaged sectors of the planet. They coordinated with smaller groups of survivors, mapping safe routes and clearing debris. Each rescue mission provided more data, which was fed back into operational planning, allowing humans to anticipate the next challenges before they arose. They adapted constantly, learning from the environment and the enemy's remaining systems, and adjusting strategies in real time. To the aliens, it was like watching a species move as one entity, operating with unmatched efficiency and foresight. Even as they performed these tasks, humans never lost sight of their primary goal, the protection of life. Any remaining enemy forces were neutralized only when absolutely necessary. There was no desire for destruction beyond what was required to secure safety. When old weapons caches or automated drones threatened survivors, they were disarmed with precision, avoiding unnecessary collateral damage. The aliens noticed this restraint, contrasting it with their own species' tendencies to respond with panic or overreaction. Humanity's approach was deliberate, disciplined, and calculated, yet humane. Throughout the rescue, the humans worked tirelessly, never showing exhaustion in ways that mattered to the survivors. Meals, rest periods, and rotations were managed efficiently, allowing operations to continue around the clock. The aliens could see the humans' determination, not as a show of power, but as a testament to their commitment to life. In every gesture, every careful step, every coordinated move, the message was clear: no one would be abandoned. As survivors were brought to safety, human medical teams established triage centers equipped to handle alien biology as best as possible. They adapted quickly to unfamiliar anatomy, improvising treatments when necessary, and ensuring that every patient received immediate attention. For many aliens, it was the first time they had seen such care extended so calmly and systematically. The trauma they had endured was immense, but humans created pockets of stability, restoring a sense of order and security amidst the chaos. By the end of the operation, thousands of survivors had been rescued, and the planet's most critical infrastructure had been stabilized. Humans had carried the injured, repaired what could be repaired, and created safe zones for continued habitation. The alien population, once terrified and hopeless, began to understand the scale and depth of the human effort. They realized that the species they had feared, whispered about, or ignored had become their lifeline. When the last groups were evacuated or secured, humans paused only briefly to assess the situation. They did not linger unnecessarily. Their mission, while not complete, had achieved a turning point. The planet, though scarred, was no longer on the verge of total collapse. Its people, once vulnerable and abandoned, had hope again. The alien survivors could hardly comprehend the dedication and skill required to accomplish what humans had done in such a short time. In the quiet moments after the operation, some humans looked around the planet and reflected. They had acted not for recognition or reward, but because it was the right thing to do. They had faced unknown dangers, adjusted strategies in real time, and performed acts of bravery without hesitation. The aliens watching now saw not just strangers from a distant world, but a species capable of extraordinary discipline, compassion, and courage. And as the humans prepared to leave the planet once more, moving on to regroup, repair, and plan the next phase, one truth became undeniable. This was more than a rescue operation. It was a demonstration of what humanity could do when it committed itself fully to protecting life. The alien survivors would remember it forever, and the galaxy, though watching from afar, would begin to understand that when humans answered a call for help, they did so completely, efficiently, and with unwavering purpose. The planet was saved not just by technology or weapons, but by the human instinct to act decisively and responsibly, to protect those who could not protect themselves, and to turn chaos into order without asking for recognition. Every life saved was a testament to that instinct, and every human action reinforced the idea that this species, forged on a harsh and unforgiving world, had the strength, intelligence, and moral focus to truly make a difference even on a distant, alien world under siege. When the last of the survivors had been secured and the immediate dangers on the planet neutralized, the humans began the process of withdrawing. But their departure was not a quiet retreat. It was a demonstration of precision, discipline, and quiet power. The aliens watched carefully as fleets lifted from the planet's surface and returned to orbit, then accelerated back into deep space, leaving behind a world that was scarred but alive. Every movement was deliberate, ensuring that no additional harm came to the planet or its people. The humans did not linger unnecessarily, but neither did they leave in haste. They had completed their mission, and they had done it with a clarity and focus that was rare in the galaxy. For the alien population, the experience was transformative. They had lived in terror, hiding from forces they could not confront, and had come to believe that hope was gone. Yet humans had arrived, not as conquerors or oppressors, but as protectors. They had restored order without domination, healed injuries without expecting gratitude, and organized chaos without seeking reward. It was a type of intervention that no alien civilization had ever experienced before. The sheer capability combined with restraint left a deep impression, altering their understanding of what other species could be capable of. The news of human involvement began to spread across nearby systems. Even as the humans maintained operational security, messages picked up by distant sensors and reports from surviving communications revealed the species acting with uncanny efficiency. Observers from other civilizations were forced to revise their understanding of humanity. They had always considered humans unpredictable, perhaps dangerous, but also limited in their reach. Now, they were witnessing a species capable of operating far from home, in unknown territory, with extraordinary coordination, and without causing unnecessary destruction. It was both alarming and awe-inspiring. As humans moved away from the planet, they continued to monitor the area from orbit, ensuring that no residual threats remained and that the survivors could begin the long process of rebuilding. They coordinated remotely, providing guidance on repairs, communications, and resource management. Even at a distance, their presence and oversight reassured the alien population. It was a demonstration of responsibility that went beyond immediate action. Humans did not simply arrive, act, and vanish. They ensured continuity, demonstrating foresight and accountability. Other species in the galaxy began to notice this pattern. Humans were not simply aggressive or opportunistic. They were deliberate and principled. They acted not for glory or conquest, but because they had the ability and knowledge to do so. This understanding spread slowly at first, then more rapidly, as distant observers shared reports. Rumors of the humans' intervention circulated, often exaggerated, sometimes incomplete, but always reflecting the same central truth. Humanity could be relied upon to act decisively and effectively in times of extreme crisis. For the rescued aliens, the immediate aftermath was a mix of relief, awe, and disbelief. Many had lost friends and family in the attacks, but the presence of humans had prevented even greater catastrophe. They began to rebuild their communities, guided by the instructions and temporary structures the humans had left behind. Every system repaired, every shelter secured, and every survivor transported safely was a reminder of the extraordinary effort humans had undertaken. To them, these actions seemed almost legendary. A species from a distant world, unknown to most, had intervened with such effectiveness and care that it changed the trajectory of their civilization's survival. Human crews, while preparing to leave, reflected on the mission. They had entered a system under siege, faced unknown enemies, and acted with discipline and courage. They had coordinated rescue, medical treatment, and defense under conditions that would have broken lesser species. For many, it was a confirmation of what they had always known about themselves. Humans could endure the impossible, adapt instantly to new threats, and make choices that preserved life above all else. This mission was not about power or territory, it was about responsibility. And the humans had fulfilled that responsibility with precision and moral clarity. Even as they departed, humans left behind a presence that would continue to be felt. Communications, guidance, and support systems remained active, enabling the aliens to recover more quickly than they otherwise could have. These actions went beyond immediate assistance. They laid the foundation for a more resilient civilization. The humans did not demand acknowledgement or repayment. Their intervention was complete in itself, a reflection of the principle that helping those in need was an obligation, not a transaction. The galaxy, watching from afar, began to shift its perspective. Humans were no longer just a dangerous species from a high-gravity world. They were a force capable of disciplined, precise action, and driven by responsibility as much as by survival instincts. Observers speculated on the implications. If humans could operate so effectively so far from home, how would they act in direct contact with other civilizations? How much influence could they wield, intentionally or not, across the stars? The answers were uncertain, but one fact became clear. Humans would never be underestimated again. The alien survivors, for their part, started to tell stories of the humans' arrival. Accounts varied, some emphasizing the courage of soldiers, others the skill of engineers, or the care of medics. Yet all narratives shared the same central truth. Humans had appeared when no one else had acted decisively, and had saved lives against overwhelming odds. These stories were passed to neighboring systems, creating a network of knowledge about humanity that had not existed before. When the humans finally left the system entirely, they did so without fanfare or declaration. There was no parade, no announcement of victory. For them, the mission was complete. Their presence had been sufficient, their actions had mattered, and the survivors were safe. As the fleet accelerated into the depths of space, each crew member carried with them the knowledge that humanity had done something extraordinary. They had answered a call that no one else would, and in doing so, had reshaped the galaxy's understanding of what it meant to be human. The implications of this mission extended far beyond the immediate rescue. Other species, even those who had observed quietly from afar, began to reconsider how they viewed humanity. Myths and fears were replaced with recognition of competence, morality, and discipline. Humans were no longer just survivors. They were a species that could act decisively, intelligently, and responsibly in the most extreme situations. This perception would influence interstellar relations, diplomacy, and conflict for generations to come. For the alien population, the impact was personal and profound. Survivors began to rebuild not just physically but psychologically, inspired by the actions of the humans. Communities that had been fractured by fear began to cooperate again. Guided by the temporary systems and instructions the humans had implemented, trust, hope, and resilience started to return. The humans had not just saved lives, they had given the aliens the tools and confidence to survive and thrive in the aftermath. In quiet moments, some of the aliens reflected on what it meant to have humans in their lives, even briefly. They recognized a species that did not act out of fear, greed, or pride, but out of principle and responsibility. They saw beings capable of extreme focus, ingenuity, and adaptability, yet guided by compassion and foresight. These observations would influence the aliens' understanding of ethics, strategy, and survival for years, shaping their culture and policies in ways that would honor the humans. Intervention. As the human fleet disappeared into the vastness of space, the galaxy itself seemed to take note. Reports traveled, discussions began in distant council chambers, and the ripple of humanity's actions spread further than anyone could immediately measure. One thing was certain: the universe had witnessed a species that could act when needed, that could combine power with restraint, and that could intervene decisively to protect life without seeking reward or recognition. And so, the galaxy learned its first major lesson about humans. When the Deathworlders answer a call for help, they do so completely, efficiently, and with unwavering commitment. They do not arrive to conquer, they arrive to save. They do not seek glory, they seek responsibility. And in that moment, the distant stars themselves seemed to acknowledge a new reality: humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never look at them the same way again. For the humans, the mission had ended, but the experience would remain with them forever. They had faced unknown enemies, navigated chaos, saved countless lives, and withdrawn without claiming reward. They had demonstrated what it meant to act decisively, morally, and with intelligence in the most extreme circumstances. And as they charted a course back toward familiar space, each crew member understood that humanity's story had grown larger, richer, and far more respected than ever before. The survivors on the alien planet, the observers in the galaxy, and the humans themselves would carry the lessons of that mission forward. It was a story of courage, discipline, and responsibility that would echo across systems, shaping perceptions and decisions for generations. Humanity had answered a call no one else would, and in doing so, they had left a mark that could never be erased. Their actions proved that when the universe called, the Deathworlders would rise and the galaxy would remember.